We've all heard it. Violence is not the answer. Here's the problem with that sentence. That phrase is ignorant. It ignores the already violent systems that you might already be either profiting from, surviving under, or so insulated from that you don't even see the consequences of the system that is already violent and oppressive. Violence is not the answer. It is never the answer, but it is the question. It is being asked of you every single day, whether you realize it or not. Hello, and welcome back to the Irreverent Podcast for Ambitious Rebels, What the Hélène. I'm Hélène, and today I'm here very unexpectedly because I wanted to get something off of my chest. Because especially in recent events, I'm seeing a certain phrase be repeated a lot, and I want to tackle it. And that phrase is, violence is not the answer. So the dictionary definition of violence actually says it's the use of physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill. However, anyone who's ever been in any kind of abusive situation or bullied at school when you were 6 years old know that those sticks and stones may not break your bones. Being bullied and harmed in a violent emotional way may traumatize you forever. And you do not need a bruise to show proof that violence was exerted upon you. And it is through this redefined notion of violence that I want you to start seeing the world in a different light. If physical violence is your only definition of violence, you have already missed 90% of what violence actually is. There is systemic violence, which includes oppression, poverty, war economies, racism, patriarchy, capitalism that grinds people down and exploits their labor for profit. The iPhone in your hand right now that is relying on the cobalt mined from children in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that is violence. You may be listening to me through a service provider whose CEO donates billions to drone warfare companies that are actively being sent to murder other people. So I'm sorry, but even listening to this podcast may or may not be condoning even your physical violence that you so hate on. There's also relational violence, which includes gaslighting, neglect, withholding affection, manipulation, any kind of silencing or passive aggression, right? We think we need blood on the wall and proof in writing that some sort of crime has been committed when the writing is already on the wall, but written and etched into your soul, into the personality that changes and quiets itself and shrinks itself every time it learned to conform to the system that was already subjecting it to violence from the day it was born. Now, there's also internal violence, which includes self-abandonment, internalized shame, overworking yourself, denying yourself rest, biting your tongue when your body is screaming at you to speak, denying your own intuition. Anytime you don't trust your own judgment and subject it through the lens of someone else. These forms don't draw blood, but they cut just as deep. Think about being bullied as a kid, or even, God forbid, being abused at home. You didn't need to come away with a black eye or a broken bone for that violence to alter who you are. A single cruel phrase, repeated enough times, could bend your entire personality. Being ignored when you sought attention and love and affection, but your brain didn't know how to comprehend and differentiate between their struggles and their inability to show you the capacity of love you deserved, and your own sense of self-worth. The fact that you had to negotiate a difference between what they said and what you felt because it was never clear, that was violent. Withholding love and constantly dismissing you could wire you to believe that you weren't worthy of taking up space. And that has led to some of the people-pleasing tendencies and some of the subjugation you are suffering today. Violence does not need a bruise or a scar. It just needs enough pervasive repetition for you to start taking it for granted. And that is why the phrase being circulated lately is really chafing under my skin, because it is to put blinders on to the nth degree to avoid recognizing and zooming out and seeing that violence is something that we absolutely glorify in this economy, in this society, in this modern world. If violence is not the answer, why do we send people to war? If violence is not the answer, why do we still have military parades and Veterans Day and all of these accolades that we bestow upon folks who've made a living out of killing? Why, if violence is not the answer? Violence remains the question. And what upsets you is how different people have answered that question every day. And so the question I'm going to ask you today is, how do you answer the call and the question of violence? We have to first name and normalize the fact that violence is not the answer, but rather the deeper question we are confronted with. It is always asking us something deeper than we may be wanting to admit to ourselves. Whether it's this neglect, systemic oppression, exploitation, avoidance, passive aggression conducted on ourselves or on others by others. We have to wonder, and we have to get curious and look within. Here are some questions that violence asks of you daily. Violence asks, what will you tolerate? Where are you allowing harm to continue, whether from systems, workplaces, family dynamics, or your own self-talk? It also asks, whose humanity are you willing to diminish? Even subtle violence, like ignoring, dismissing, exploiting, requires someone to be made smaller, less worthy, less than. Whose deaths are you apathetic to, and whose do you remain sympathetic and upset by? This question doesn't just pertain to human life and whether you value the humanity, but how do you view life in general? When is it acceptable to cut down a tree? When is it acceptable to enjoy the burger in the drive-through lane, knowing that the cow did not give its life willingly? Everything is a byproduct of the question that violence asks. So recognize that every time you are faced with it and confronted with violence, you are also being asked, what do you believe in? What do you believe you deserve? What do you believe others deserve? When you stay silent, accept mistreatment, or turn away from your own needs, you're answering that question, whether you realize it or not. It could be happening at the most unconscious level, but you're answering the question of violence in turn. Violence also asks, what story might you be complicit in? Are you keeping the peace at the expense of truth? Or rocking the boat to make sure harm is named and stopped? Are you willing to make waves? Are you confusing making waves for actively drowning others when you go to express your opinion? Because there is a difference. There are those who speak in an effort for the rising tide to lift all boats. And there are those who speak in order for that tide to become a tsunami and eradicate an entire population of people. So it behooves you to know the impact of your words, of your belief, every time you go to answer that question of violence. What will be the consequences of your answer? Violence asks, where does power live in this interaction? Violence, whether physical, systemic, or subtle, is always about control and power dynamics. Now, recognizing that is the first step to actually reclaiming your own power in the given situation. There is a lot of propaganda and PR campaigns going for every facet of the imagination. We are inundated with storytelling and narratives that will push a specific acceptable form of an answer to the question of violence. Part of reclaiming your own power means using discernment to notice what stories are already being told in the world right now. How is the answer of violence being framed in such a way that some deem it acceptable and others abhorrent? Who is the victim in this situation? Is it you from just listening to the information being presented to you? Is it the person on the screen? Is it the person spouting the information and reinforcing that repetition, just like that insult you heard as a kid on the playground? Violence is constantly being bestowed upon you. Violence also asks, how free are you really? Not just externally, but internally. Are you still bound by the unspoken rules of society, your family, your culture, your religion, that say you can't just take up space, you can't speak up, you can't refuse, you can't be discerning, that you can't apply nuance, that you couldn't have a different answer every time violence knocks on your door and asks you the question? As in everything I do and preach, I am not seeking or asking any of us to show up perfectly, to have the right, correct, perfect answer when violence comes calling. But we have to recognize that we have been answering it in one way or another every single day, in every single minute of every single second. And to presuppose that there is a universally right and correct answer to that question that can be applied every time it comes knocking and calling is to remain ignorant to the possibility that you do not know what you would do in any given circumstance. Beyond checking your privilege, beyond checking the context, you have to realize that our capacity, our emotional capacity, our physical capacity, our mental capacity shifts moment by moment, day by day. Because these things are variable and we cannot predict them at all costs, we have to be grounded in the fact and accept that there is so many things that we cannot control in this life, but we have to acknowledge that things are trying to control us, that we are subject to influence, that we are vulnerable to being influenced, and that we have to be that much more intentional, that much more discerning. So I encourage you to see violence in this case as a revelation because it exposes your values. What matters to you more? Comfort? Your truth? Connection? What values does the answer to violence today underscore? It exposes your limits. How far will you go before you finally say no? It also exposes complicity. Are you surviving within the system, profiting from it, or disrupting it? We rarely say this out loud, but we do value different lives differently. Every time we unconsciously discriminate about whether we give $1 to the homeless person standing on the street corner or we choose to spend it at McDonald's a few blocks down the road, we are deciding that one life is worth more or less than another. You would rather pay $5 to eat a slaughtered cow and chicken than you would to give a homeless man a chance to go buy a drink. What does it say about your values in that regard? I know some people are going to listen to this and think, wow, Hélène, that's incredibly condescending and judgmental of you to be acting as though we are so complicit. Girl, I am too. My house is a byproduct, is an answer to the violence that was committed centuries ago. Even the room that I am standing in, the recording equipment I am using, the home that I technically own on a piece of paper is an answer to the question of violence. It is the consequence of the indigenous folks of this land being systemically and systematically rounded up and slowly exploited and exterminated until there was nothing left but little old me to go buy a house centuries later. Those folks, I would say, I am not passing or rendering judgment. I am asking you to evaluate and be discerning through the lens with which you're viewing everything today. We want to have more nuanced, more complex conversations. We want to shape a different and better world. We have to acknowledge some of the harsher realities that come with it. I don't think you're responsible for everything else, just like I know I'm not personally responsible for the indigenous tribes that were pushed out of the land on which I own my house now. But just because my name is on a piece of paper held in a courthouse does not neglect the violence that befell the local tribes in Ohio that led to me being able to sign my little piece of paper. This might be a good time to acknowledge the Odawa, the Ojibwe, the Shawnee, and the Wyandot, among many other tribes who once lived across this vast region near Lake Erie. And I do not pretend that those indigenous tribes did not commit violence upon each other. Violence is a question that has been asked since the dawn of time, whether you believe in the myth of Cain and Abel, whether it goes even further back, whether you're looking at Remus and Romulus, we are always being asked, what are we willing to do and believe in and stand up for? How can I not be passionate about this? How can I not sound incredibly determined to help you see that there is more than one answer to this question? I'm not here to vilify whatever answer you provide. I am here to help you see that there is more than one answer to this question, and that it is ignorant to presuppose that one answer will fit the question every time it is posed, because it is not always being asked of you. It might be asked of someone else. It might be being asked of your neighbor. It behooves us to know what is going to guide how we answer this question. I use a lot of ocean analogies in my coursework. I have the Self-Expression Academy, which is acronymed as the C, because I think it is one of those powerful things in the entire universe. And it is such a beautiful analogy for how we move through this world. I'm seeing so many people in this analogy try to fight the ocean because they don't know how to swim. They keep trying to get into a battle with the tide and the current and getting mad at themselves for not being better swimmers, getting annoyed because no one's coming to rescue them. They're trying to punch the shit out of the wave that keeps trying to drown them and overtake them. You're still getting mad and punching the ocean, thinking that it's trying to drown you, when what you need to be doing is learning how to swim. And if you're saying, well, Hélène, swimming is exhausting, I could never cross the ocean and fight its currents. Of course not. Then it's time to build a boat. Once you know how to swim, let's build a boat. Get on a friend's boat. Let's figure out how we're going to get to where we need to go. But Hélène, it's exhausting sailing through these waters. I need more resources. Wonderful. Come into harbor, check in with your community, resupply, find your people, stay grounded. Well, Hélène, I don't know where to go. That's what lighthouses are for. This is where your anchored, grounded, purposed leadership is going to come into play. And so while I've often preached, go ahead, rock the boat, make waves, it is so much more than just getting to your desired destination. When we look at how violence is being asked of us every single day, we have to choose to answer it from this grounded place, because the waves themselves are just as violent. Whether the sea erodes the land over time and millennia, whether it grinds down stone into sand, that too is a violent process. The day you were born was violent as can be. So violence has been asked of you since the day you were born. So no, violence is not the answer, but it is always the question. So I leave you with the same question we started with. What answer are you going to give to violence every day through what you say, what you silence, what you choose to do next? I'm asking you to do the depth and level of introspection that lets you know what can you get present in. When is it time to drop anchor? When is it time to rock the boat? When is it time for you to make waves or rally your crew and fight the good fight? Also, when is it time to come into harbor, to rest, to resupply? When is it your time to be called to stand guard in the lighthouse and guide people to shore, guide people away from the rocks? I want you to feel as supported as you can be in that process of self-inquiry. I want you to feel unfuckwithable and also understand that you are never going to be perfect, but you deserve to know why you are doing what you are doing, and that it's okay for your values to have different priorities and for them to have changed and for you to question what you've always taken for granted. I am here to help. I am here to listen. So please feel free to contact me. My contact information is always in the show notes below. You can always DM me on Instagram at Hélène Can Help. And ultimately, we can continue this conversation there. But I want to remind you that the conversation most important is the one that you have with yourself, with your thoughts, with the sensations going through your body right now as you listen to what I've said, to what I've shared. Thank you. It's been a privilege to have your ear. I will see you on the next episode.